Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections since we are recording it for a radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. You're welcome to post your questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Gigi Shum, host of Women in Washington on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Nancy Potok, Chief Statistician of the United States, Christina Ho, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Accounting Policy and Financial Transparency, U.S. Department of the Treasury, Robin Konkel, Attorney Advisor, Social Security Administration, and Angela Zutavern, Vice President, Booz Allen Hamilton. So ladies, welcome this morning and thanks so much for joining me. Today we're going to talk about data science and machine learning in the government. So Nancy, I'm going to start with you. What are some of the exciting things that you see going on in government with regard to data science or machine learning?
Right now, I think there's tremendous opportunities and innovation going on with data science. I see it particularly in the statistical world, but I see it where very valuable data is crossing over to help the federal government, states, and localities with their operations. For example, setting up really strong scientific computing environments is allowing cities, for example, to get access to federal data and their own data and partner with universities and consultants to really understand their operations. And I know there's a couple of environments set up by some very, very talented women in the academia that have tremendous computing power that allow these things to take place. In addition, I think the Census Bureau, for example, where I worked just previously to becoming the chief statistician, used data analytics and data science tremendously to revamp their operations for the 2020 census to save over $5 billion by incorporating operations research in real time into the field to feed back analytical information to their operations centers and help the door-to-door enumeration happen much more efficiently. So those are 2 examples I can think of right off the bat, but they're really happening all across government.
I totally agree with Nancy. Another cool example that comes to mind is the U.S. Army with their PNT, which is position, navigation, and timing. In the past, people relied on GPS. The problem with GPS is it can be easily spoofed, it can be blocked, it's not always reliable. And so the Army is using machine intelligence to not only connect their existing GPS systems, but also to fill in the gaps for when GPS is not available.
So Christina, you're with Department of Treasury, and I know that you have some projects going on there. Can you tell us a little bit about those? And I'd love to understand the examples that these other ladies brought up were about helping organizations to have greater capabilities or to be more efficient. So what's Treasury doing with data science?
Yes, so in order to apply these technology, one thing you need to have is data. And I just successfully led the implementation of the first open data law, which is the Data Act, and publishing all the agency expenditures, so the entire federal government spending online and making them reusable and open. And in terms of scope, last year the Treasury published the federal government spent about close to $4 trillion. And so that is about 20% of the GDP. And because of this law, we're now publishing all that data so that people can harness the value of that. And the way we actually implemented it was a very modern way. This is really requiring us to get the data out of over 100 federal agencies and all the non-interoperable systems, and requires to set a standard to get all the data out and validate them so that it could be good quality. In order to give value, we need quality data. So that's essentially what we did in the past 3 years. And we publish it in May based on the statutory deadline. And we are doing a lot of work now to analyze it, to do analytic, apply also machine learning on some of the data to learn more. I think that the machine learning technology also gives us an opportunity to fill in some human capital gap, because a big gap in the federal government from a human capital perspective is analytics. And I think that by incorporating some of these technology, it can help us fill some of these gaps and help us to be able to derive more value for the agencies, for the public, and stimulate innovation in the private sector.
So that's a great point, Christina. I mean, I know that one of the big challenges with data and data science is always turning that data into intelligence that is therefore actionable and you can do something with it. Do any of you have any stories about how you've taken data and through using some of the new technology that's available, turned it into intelligence that maybe guided you in a different direction that you wouldn't have gone?
Yeah, I have a great one for the Office of Disability Adjudication and Review at the Social Security Administration. We're currently facing an unprecedented public crisis of having over 1 million cases pending at our hearing level. So we are applying in many different ways data analytics and machine learning tools in order to identify ways to both expedite cases through the disability process while also maintaining and enhancing the quality in terms of policy compliance and legal sufficiency. One example that I'm working on with my colleague Kurt Glaze is a software program that combines traditional data mining and text mining and natural language processing and machine learning. So all of those types of tools together to create a software that works a lot like a fancy spell check or a useful grammar check, where it, once a decision writer, an administrative law judge, completes a draft of a hearing decision, it can be run like a quality check to check for internal inconsistencies, to make sure the best kind of product is being delivered out at the hearing level, which should in turn, at my level, the Office of Appellate Operations, reduce the amount of errors we see and reduce the amount of cases that need to be re-adjudicated.
So you're actually finding inconsistent, when you talk about inconsistencies, you're saying in the way that a case was originally adjudicated.
Now we're saying in the actual hearing decision document itself, if there's a statement of the claimant is a certain age, then we want to make sure that the age is consistent through the hearing decision. Or if the claimant has a certain education level that we found, then the medical vocational rules we cite at step 5 of our sequential evaluation process should be consistent with those. So it gets rid of a lot of the things that might be inadvertent, like typos, just to make sure that the document itself is policy compliant and legally sufficient. So it's a solid document, it's an accurate document, and it will withstand appellate level review.
Great. How about you, Angela? I know you just recently published a book called The Mathematical Corporation. So first of all, congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you. It was a team effort, including a great story from Nancy in the book.
Well, so that's what I was going to ask. You must have heard a lot of great stories of data science being used in impactful and interesting ways in government. Can you think of some that particularly stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the big breakthroughs are happening because we can now use not only structured data, but unstructured data as well. And we didn't have those capabilities until a few years ago. And so by unstructured data, I mean things like videos and photographs and free-form text fields. So some of the breakthroughs we're seeing with those types of unstructured data include the medical field, so using machine intelligence to read heart scans to detect heart disease or lung scans to find lung cancer sooner. We're also seeing it in fields like law enforcement. So what do you do with all the body camera video data, and how do you make meaning out of that data? Or what can you do to find suspects who may appear on video surveillance cameras? And it extends through everything the government does, including better delivering citizen services at a more cost-effective rate, and every mission you can think of. And then it also applies to back office operations, in particular IT operations and maintenance, as well as cyber operations. Robotic process automation, as well as more advanced machine intelligence type applications, can automate a lot of what we do today in IT, O&M, and cyber operations. And those are big expense items for many agencies. The question then becomes, how can we best utilize the talent that's freed up from those more mundane tasks and apply it to more creativity and innovation and bring even greater value?
And
An example.
yeah, let's hear it, Christina.
So the federal government spent so much money, and about 75% goes outside of government, and in the form of grants, loans, insurance, and even contract. I have seen some recent examples where people use the spending data and linking it with other data like demographic or unemployment rate to assess the effectiveness of a particular policy, say housing, for example. And using machine learning technology will allow us to be able to do a lot of them a lot more at scale. So I think those are things that actually touch people's lives every day, and that example, when you think about even data like, say, spending data, doesn't seem like it's that relevant to a day-to-day life. But when we use these technology and linking them together with other data that's already publicly available to assess the effectiveness of policy, it actually can help inform policy making and allow us to execute better and serve the public in a much better way.
I feel like I need to jump in and mention a couple of issues, though, that I think about a lot.
Sure.
Coming from the statistical community. And that is privacy and confidentiality. And, you know, that's something that people worry about a lot and think about a lot, particularly with the technological ability to link so many records. And you know, I think it's important to make a distinction between open data, which Christine was referring to, and the government really has a big push to put a lot of open data out, and statistical data and other data that are collected under a pledge of confidentiality or protected by the Privacy Act. So there's a lot of very serious policy issues that I think the government has to come to grips with in order to advance this further, because it's technology, but it's not just a technology issue. And so if you're going to link statistical data, even though it's been sort of de-identified and scrubbed, and the environment has more and more open data out there, and the computing power is greater, you have to think a lot differently about how you're going to protect privacy when you put data out there. So it's one thing for an agency to have its own data, but when you start combining it, when it starts becoming available, as it should be, to the public or to app developers or others who want to make use of government data, it has very high economic value. Then you have to think about that whole environment. Who owns the data? How do you protect it? These are very important issues, and so the government really has to come to grips with what data are going to be open and interoperable, and what can only be accessed under very controlled conditions for researchers who want to build evidence and understand how do government policies work in housing, education, building the economy, but still protect privacy and confidentiality. So we can't overlook that.
That's an excellent point, Nancy. Can you maybe give us an example of an situation that either has occurred or could occur, of where you take open data and it's fine, but by combining it with some statistical data, all of a sudden now you're treading on what could be some serious privacy issues.
Yeah, well, I think when, a lot of agencies really need to pay a lot of attention to the Privacy Act, because they have data that they're putting out in the open environment that is only protected by the Privacy Act, whereas the statistical data is covered by other laws specifically to protect confidentiality. So if you put out a lot of survey data, but then people out there, who are very technologically savvy can grab a lot of open records, and these come from state, local, not just the federal government. If eventually something will happen. I don't know of anything that actually has happened where people have been able to sort of de-identify data that's out there, but it's a risk, and I'm a big believer in risk management, and so it's not just the cybersecurity piece of it, it's this other piece that I think really has to, there's a lot of effort. NIST is looking at that, the Census Bureau's looking at it. Anyone who is concerned about confidential data has been looking at this issue. And fortunately, the technology is advancing to be able to keep up with what's out there in the world. So this is more preventive before something happens.
Well, we know that a lot of marketing companies have made tremendous use of big data. If you go to a website and you're looking to potentially purchase, a new car, the next thing you know, on all of your social media sites and the cards that you've been looking at are showing up. So they're able to see what your interests are and then track that back and do very targeted marketing. I guess the same sort of thing could happen with federal data that's out there, federal or state and local, any government data that's out there. Companies could use that and try to target market to you, or who knows what reason.
Right.
I'm your moderator, Gigi Shum, on the discussion Women of Washington, Data Science and Machine Learning in Government, sponsored by Booz Allen Hamilton on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.